Ending this webinar session today. It has been a great pleasure and a learning week. In the first week, we had sports sciences webinars, and from the 20th of May, we have started the sports nutrition webinar series. We have had two eminent speakers in the last 2 days, Ms. Apurva and Vani Bhushanan, a very senior nutritionist from the Sports Authority of India. In today's session, we have two speakers, young, eminent, and dynamic speakers of our association. They are the founder members of the association, Mihira, Khopkar, and Pallavi. I welcome them to speak on the topic nutrition for endurance sports. And initially, I would like to again request everyone to be in mute mode. Please do not unmute yourself. Whatever queries you have will be answered at the end of the session, and please cooperate with us. We have had very nice speakers and it will be a very good learning experience for all of you. Also, we will record the presentation and it would be shared on our website. And please do not ask for the PPTs, because you have to make your own notes and learn by reading a lot. So this is presentation by Mihira and Pallavi is definitely going to help you for your future work and to learn to become a sports nutritionist. I welcome you all for this session. And at the end of the session, if there are any queries related to the association, we can answer those. Thank you. Over to Mihira and Pallavi. You can start.
Hi everybody, I've just put up the presentation and Pallavi is to go first. So Pallavi, whenever you're ready, you begin.
All right, hello everybody and good afternoon. I'm sure you must have enjoyed other sessions as well of ASNFS. And today me and Mihira are coming up with nutrition for endurance sports. So Mihira is handling slides, so if there is any lag, so please help us and understand us. So basically, I am practicing in Mumbai. I'm a sports nutritionist practicing since last 10 years. I'm associated with most of the runners, rifle shooters, and apart from that, I'm associated with school kids as well. So in today's topic, we are talking about endurance sports. So I will be covering what is endurance sports, energy system, effect of ethnicity in endurance athletes, macronutrient requirement, carbohydrate loading, micronutrients, and some case scenarios of athletes. And Mihira is going to address again some athlete case scenarios, international athletes preferably, race day strategies, hydration, and fat adaptation. So I hope you enjoy the session and feel free if you have any questions. Next, please. Well, so when you talk about endurance, it's more of ability to sustain a specific activity for a prolonged period of time. So when it comes to endurance, it's cardiovascular endurance, muscular endurance, aerobic capacity, anaerobic endurance at the beginning, your muscle strength, and your mental toughness. So it's a psychological, nutritional, and physiological engagement of an athlete when athlete is into endurance sports. Next, please. So if you, I'm sure many of you are sports nutritionists over here, so you must be knowing what are endurance sports. So cycling, running, swimming, boxing, basketball, rugby, hockey, soccer. So basically sports which are like long duration sports are considered as endurance sports. Next, please. Now, you must have heard about Ironmans and Ultramans and triathlons. So I know many of us are knowing Milind Somendo, so as Ironman of India. So basically, this is one of the sports, which is endurance event. Now, if you observe this slide specifically, you will see that there are 3 categories. So you have to swim first, like almost 3.8 kilometers, then cycle, and then go for running. So to perform these activities, you need specific type of strength, physiological, nutritional help, and guidance and training. So I'm not going thorough into it, but we are definitely looking forward for 2 Ironman of India and their diet schedule. Next, please. Well, so very important aspect of endurance.
Hello, Pallavi.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. Can you be a little louder?
Okay. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah. All right. Am I audible now? Is this better?
Yes, better.
Better?
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. So when we talk about endurance athlete, first and very important aspect is body composition of the athlete. So what's your endurance body type? So as we discussed, either skiing or swimming or running, you need a specific body type. So what type of body type you need? Next, please. So we will have a look on that. First is runners. So you must have seen many runners. You must be consulting many runners. You have to make sure that their fat percentage should be under control. So generally, runners who are practicing, they are skinny, and very important is lesser the gravity, more the efficiency into running. So that's the body type specification. So this is the percentage of fat in men and women in different sports, which I have narrated over here. Now coming to cyclists, they have muscular legs because most of their activity depends on how they perform. Then going to swimming. So swimmers are strong, tall, they have large feet and flexed ankles as well. Now triathletes have combined specification of all three parts. So they are lean, they are strong, they are tall, and very important, they are very flexible. Surprisingly, if you see swimming, so they have comparatively higher fat percentage in men and women, both of them. Okay. One more sport is rowing, wherein strong physique and lean muscle is required. And last is like the skiing, wherein you have to be tall and really strong. And the lowest percentage of fat is observed in all the skiers. Next, please. Now, when you are seeing like body fat percentage, we all have this body composition analysis. Okay, am I audible now? Somebody have messaged that I'm not audible. Okay. Charu have messaged. Okay, Mihira, Apurva, am I audible? All right. Okay.
Yes, you are.
All right. All right. Fair enough. So basically, we do body composition analysis before we do any kind of consultation, especially nutrition consultation. We make sure that for athlete, we will be doing body composition analysis. Now to reduce the fat percentage, to ensure that person will get into metabolic adaptation and get certain type of body type, we have to ensure these factors which you are seeing on the screen. So macronutrients, micronutrients, either ketone bodies, how they will react to skeletal muscle mass, what will be the impact of food on their protein requirement, will it decrease the catabolism, will it increase the muscle protein synthesis, what will be the protein sparing action of carbohydrates we are providing, when we are giving fats to the person. So visible fat, invisible fat combined together, percentage of these macronutrients matter a lot because it has again impact on the brain functions, and very important is your gastrointestinal tract, right? So we will be having a look on our energy systems, our macronutrients next. Yes. Now, why nutrition is required? Okay, back. Yeah. So as I discussed earlier, to increase your oxygen saturation, to maintain your respiratory rate, to maintain your cardiovascular endurance, that is your increase your blood volume, increase muscle mass, and of course your hemoglobin levels, you have to make sure that you will have planned nutrition strategy. Next, please. Now, as we discussed, endurance sports is always aerobic energy system, right? So you all know what is aerobic energy system, where most of the time renewal of lactate takes place, right? And restoration of phosphocreatine happens. Apart from that, we have to make sure that if you are giving carbohydrates to the person, glycogen storage of the person will not deplete soon, okay? So that carbohydrate will delay the fatigue of the person when the person is into endurance sports. Next, please. Well, so this is the pyramid of nutrient requirements. Okay, so very basic pyramid, which is important, that important aspect of this pyramid is water for better hydration. Second is carbohydrate, which provides you maximum energy. Third is builds and repairs your body tissues, that is protein. Fourth, the predominant source of fuels. 5, that is your minerals, which activates and regulates your metabolic processes, and vitamins for combat stress and help in body recovering process. Now, if you see this pyramid, 3 major ingredients which are providing you good energy source, that is your carbohydrate, proteins, and fats. So let's have a glimpse on your carbohydrate intake, protein intake, and fat intake. Next, please. Yes. So you know that intensity of exercise differs from light intensity to high intensity. Now, I have purposely eliminated light intensity exercise requirement of carbohydrate from this slide. I have specifically concentrated on endurance sports, that is high intensity and very high intensity. As you know, to participate or to compete in any of the sports, person must undergo training, right? So it can be 6-month training, it can be 8 months training, it can be more than that, right? So during that time, your carbohydrate intake differs from 6 gram per kg body weight to 10 gram per kg body weight. Now, extreme cases, it can go up to 12 gram per kg body weight per day. Now, there is something called as carbohydrate loading. So basically, before the competition, we increase the carbohydrate intake of the athlete, okay? And we also check the intensity of workout. Okay, so this can differ from 10 to 12 gram per kg per 24 hour during last 36 to 40 hours day before the event. Okay, and then comes the recovery part, which we also called as transition phase, right? So this recovery portion, so first 4 hours after exercise, carbohydrate intake can be 1 to 1.2 grams per kg per hour. Next, please. Going a bit thorough into your carbohydrate requirements. When I spoke about carbohydrate loading, what we do is we boost almost 8 to 10 grams of carbohydrate per kg body weight carbohydrate before 3 to 4 days of event. Now, there are 2 cases wherein carbohydrate loading is done. One is classical and one is moderate. So earlier what happened is when dietary carbohydrates hello, can you hear me? Yeah, all right. So basically, training was completely lowered down and amount of carbohydrate was increased. So it is observed that on the day of the race, athlete performed not at that better level. Instead, now in moderate carbohydrate loading phase, when carbohydrates, okay, are increased slowly, and at the same time, intensity of workout is lowered, which is giving better results on the race day. So instead of going with classical supercompensation protocol, now we are going with moderate supercompensation protocols. Yeah, moving to next. Well, about protein, as I said, protein is having a good role in strengthening our muscles, right? So 1.7 to 2 gram of protein per kg body weight is the recommendation for protein. Now, when it is post phase, like post race phase, when we are talking about say transition phase, 20 to 25 gram of protein post training session is absolutely okay, in which 8 to 10 gram of essential amino acids and 3 gram of leucine can be included. Okay. Now, when we have to meet protein requirement of the person, we have to ensure that in case if we are adding casein, the type of protein into the diet of the person, it can be given at bedtime. So it will give better sleep and better recovery. So whenever we are talking about sports, 3 things to keep in mind is pre, post, and recovery phase. So for recovery as well, protein plays most important role. Next, please. Now moving to fat requirements. Okay. All right. So basically, when we are talking about fats, so generally endurance athlete, their diet comprises of 2,500 to 5,000 kilocalorie diet, right? So according to that, fat requirement changes. So we can start from 1 gram per kg per day, and we can go max up to 2 gram per kg per day. Okay. Now, according to their preparation time, training schedule, race day, we have to categorize the fat intake. Okay. About high fat, low carbohydrate diet and high carb, low fat diet, we will be discussing in part 2. So I'm keeping it for part 2 discussion. Next, please. Well, so now when we are balancing macronutrients, one thing which we have to see that athletes should not be energy deficient. If you see this entire figure, okay, in that what can happen if athlete is energy deficient, or there is not a particular macronutrient is not supplying specific amount of energy. There can be immunological effect. Then in females, everybody is aware of female athlete triad, right? Which is a combination of amenorrhea, osteoporosis, and low bone health. Endocrine system should not suffer. If your protein requirement is less, it will have impact on the hormone. Then if athlete is having any kind of metabolic disorders, we have to have very specific strategies for nutrition. In adolescent athletes, we have to check that growth and development of the athlete should not be stunted. Psychological factor is also important and is directly associated with the athletic triad as well. Next, please. Now, when we have spoken about macronutrients and RDS, we cannot forget our micronutrients. Now, this slide is a summary of how our micronutrients work. So basically, B complex vitamins, folate, iron, calcium, vitamin C, these are very important micronutrients when it comes to athletes. Now, apart from that, you might be thinking about antioxidant. So current research says that there is no evidence that antioxidants have that great impact on athletes' performance, specifically endurance athletes' performance. So most important micronutrients which we are going to see today are iron, calcium, and vitamin D. Next, please. So requirement of vitamin D, as everybody of you know, 1,500 to 5,000 IU until adequate serum vitamin D are reached. Then calcium should be 1,000 to 1,500 mg. And iron intake 8 mg in men and 20 mg of elemental iron. So 6 to 8 week may improve the status if iron deficiency is observed. Now, how we will come to know that the person is deficient in vitamins or minerals? So one very important factor is we have to ensure that we will take their pathology test done. Yeah, thank you, Geeta ma'am. Somebody asked what is REDS. So yeah, that's relative energy deficiency in sports. Well, so one has to ensure that we will be taking care of vitamin deficiencies as well. Yeah, next please. Well, so what is the effect if somebody is deficient in micronutrient? So lower intake of the micronutrient can lead to either, like say for example, zinc, magnesium, iron, riboflavin can reduce the endurance, can reduce the time of fatigue. So instead of delaying the fatigue, it can reduce it, reduce the work efficiency, increase heart rate, and these all factors will have impact on the performance of the athlete. So there is a possibility that poor intake of these micronutrients can lead to poor performance. So we have to take care of all these micronutrient parameters very strictly. Next, please. Now talking about Ironmans of India and Ultramans of India. So basically we all know about Milind Soman, but along with Milind Soman, I would like to highlight that Dr. Kaustubh Radkar is one of the Ironman, actually only first Ironman of India who have completed 25 Ironman competitions. Okay. And here I would like to highlight that their diet is predominantly consist of fruits, okay, which are ample amount of fibers along with carbohydrates, and it's a combination of glucose and fructose. So whenever we are thinking about carbohydrate intake, or increasing carbohydrate in diet of the athlete, we have to ensure that combination of glucose and fructose work wonder instead of giving only glucose to the athlete. Now, in case of Mr. Racker, I would like to highlight one incident that in 2016, if I'm not wrong, he had ACL injury. Okay. So as a nutritionist, our job is also to make sure that there will be injury prevention. Now, in his case, if he had suffered with injury, he took a good time to recover to that injury along with the nutritional strategies, which included good protein sources, okay, plant protein sources and animal protein sources. He had never given up on eggs. And what I have observed that chicken is being like a predominant part of his diet. After that, recently he finished 25th Ironman competition. Now for that, he have specified that I have trained for this also for at least 6 months. And that's how I have achieved it. So whenever somebody comes to you that I want to participate for any kind of endurance sports, first you see the duration of the training. That is also important because nutrition is something which works over a period of time. It's never like today you gave some strategies and after 7 days it is implemented and it's done. No. One more incident which I would like to highlight with respect to this, that one of my friend who was almost 98 kgs, okay, and very much fascinated with endurance sports and specifically running. So he tried participating in one of the triathlons, which happened in one local village of Maharashtra, that is Khopkar. Okay. So post the triathlon, he completed it because he wanted to do that. But the worst effect was he actually lost all his nails. Very important. Second, he was actually not able to walk for 3 days. He has to rest compulsory. So you have to make sure that though there is a fascination and there is a determination, these are two things which we need to highlight and which we need to emphasize in minds of people, that whenever you want to participate in a sport, train well. And while training, eat well. Just on the basis of your genotype and ethnicity, you can't say tomorrow or in next week, I'll go for the marathon running. Yeah. After checking the vitamin D and supplementation is required, so give, okay, somebody's answering something. Okay. Supplementation, so give per time is being changed to giving lower doses. So what is the protocol for athletes? Yeah, we will get back to this. Thanks for asking, Sheetal. Next, please. Yes, so we all must have seen that in Mumbai Marathon or many marathons, we see Ethiopian and Kenyan athletes which are predominantly winning it, like first 20 or first 15 are always Kenyan or Ethiopian. So there was this research which was done on them, and they found it out that their genotype and phenotype is very strong, and apart from that, their lifestyle involves lot of regular activities like running and walking a lot. Okay, next please. I'll explain you what are these factors. So basically, when this analysis was done, they have realized that genotype of the athlete also matter a lot. Apart from that, these athletes are from very early age have started extensive walking or running. Okay, plus their hemoglobin and hematocrit values are very high. Apart from that, their temperature, the weather over there is different. So they are trained to perform this activity. So they are better when it's a competition. Apart from that, one psychological aspect and financial aspect which we can talk about is they're motivated to improve their socioeconomic status. Okay, so these are few findings from that study which are making Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes to dominate the field of endurance sports. Next, please. So from part one, this is small takeaway for all of you. Like I've spoken about macronutrient, micronutrient, but I've not spoken about, okay, what food, name the food, what was it? So it's important to eat local food. And apart from that, it's important to eat a variety of local foods. Now, when I'm talking about local foods, I would like to highlight over here, we spoke about Dr. Kaustubh Radkar, who is Ironman of India and have completed 25 Ironmans. He have been participating in these marathons in 6 continents. So basically, whenever you are traveling abroad, you should know that what kind of food is available over here. So being in India, you can't say I cannot eat it. It's a part of your nutrition strategy. It's a requirement of your sport. So you have to have variety of foods in your diet. Okay. So that is important. Now, when we are talking about variety of diet, apart from that, type and timing of food is also very important. So training nutrient periodization is very important for endurance athlete, and athletes should take care of it. Now, adding plant protein or exotic food. So basically, if you are trained with it, like you can't say that, okay, I have competition there, now let me just go and have it. No, you have to incorporate these proteins, these kind of different foods since the beginning of your training. Then your body gets used to it, and then you can perform better. So eat well, make sure that your macronutrient balance is better. Now, after this, for part 2, I am handing it over to Mihira. Mihira, over to you. We are keeping last 15 minutes for question and answers. So we will be taking all the questions during that time. Yeah. Over to you, Mihira. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Pallavi, for an excellent explanation of the macronutrients and micronutrients crucial for endurance performance. Just to kind of take up from there, I think we discussed that carbohydrates continue to be a predominant source of fuel, as well as fats become an important source of fuel, as well as the distances of your in particular endurance event go on increasing. I think we begin off with 6 and we can go on to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight per day of carbohydrates with a good focus on protein, even if it's 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kilogram of body weight, but maintaining that lean muscle mass so that you're not adding any extra weight and that's not limiting your performance, but therefore balancing your entire muscle mass. And then we moved on to the micronutrients, significant and predominantly for improving your oxygen delivery. So we need those micronutrients that push in your red blood cell and hemoglobin formation, like Pallavi highlighted, iron and B12 and folate. As so is important maintaining your bone health with the emphasis of calcium and vitamin D, and therefore keeping a check on your B vitamins because they are the ones which play a very important role in your energy metabolism. And then she ended very nicely with a few case studies of these athletes who landed up following certain strategies for their specific events. And you and I, all of us would have worked with a lot of these budding and recreational athletes who are so observant about their training routine, about how they feel, how sore they are, at what kilometer did the cramp come, and what kind of nutrition strategy did they apply, and how are they going on improving, and how do they plan their entire calendar of what marathons to do, right from the South African one in June, July to Boston and so on and so forth. So my part 2 is predominantly going to revolve around a few race day strategies as well as hydration strategies. And I'm just going to touch upon fat adaptation and give you an idea on how did this start and whether high carb or high fat, which one really works for endurance events. And then just end it with a couple of key supplements that are predominantly significant for endurance sports. And while I'm doing this, I think it's absolutely impossible to not speak about ELIUD KIPCHOGE, who's a hero and legend to land up doing a sub-2 marathon last year. And some of you may already be aware of him. He tried to go sub-2 in 2017, which was the Berlin Marathon, and from there he couldn't land up hitting sub-2 in 2017. He trained back, and then he was back in 2019, and it was that whole event was made for ELIUD KIPCHOGE. And you might argue saying that he had really nice shoes by Nike, or he had this entire troop of pacers who ran behind him so that to avoid the wind drag, he had this laser that was right in ahead of him that was targeting his sub-2 pace, and so many other things, right from the course that he chose in Berlin, which was predominantly flat. It was the best climatic conditions. Having said all of that, I think nutrition still played a predominant role into his sub-2 marathon, because if any marathoner had to go sub-2, they are probably running at a speed of 4.35 minutes per mile or per 1.6 kilometer. And this is an impossible speed for you and me to even think of, because this is as high as an intensity as it can get. And it's extremely difficult to land up maintaining this speed for 2 long hours to land up ensuring that you reach the target that you planned for. Now, like as highlighted by Pallavi earlier as well, in terms of fuel utilization, as much as you would argue saying that the longer the event or the more aerobic the event is, we know that there are two predominant fuels alone, which is carbohydrates and fats, that are used as a source of energy. We try and lean on the fact that, oh, because I'm into endurance sports and I know that I want to build my aerobic capacity, I may land up relying more on triglycerides as a source of fuel, and that would help me improve my endurance performance even further. However, it always comes with a cost, and something that we as nutritionists or other sports science professionals tend to neglect is because although fats continue to be the fuel for endurance activity, we shouldn't forget the fact that they're also costly. They're not economical. When I say that, I mean that carbohydrates continue to be the most economical source of energy because they can deliver that energy quickly and they can land up delivering it at a low oxygen cost. Fats, although can provide large amounts of energy, are not just slow to reach your muscle cell and provide that energy. At the same time, they utilize probably 2 or 2.5 times more amount of oxygen, which can contribute your speed, or which can make you reduce the intensity of speed as you go forth into your event. So we definitely need to focus on carbohydrates as a source of fuel for marathons. And like Pallavi mentioned earlier about multiple transportable carbohydrates, or the combination of glucose and fructose together as an important and essential source of fuel during your endurance event. And I have highlighted around here that typically you will have probably 60 to 70 grams of carbohydrates in different forms, in gels, in sports drink per hour that you would consume. And he especially landed up consuming that every 10 minutes. Now it's pretty shocking to realize that how is it possible that he was consuming such high amount of carbohydrates so frequently for over 2 hours? Well, there are two reasons. I mean, first being that there were people on the bicycle who were giving him the gels or giving him the sports drinks that he required. But at the same time, he landed up training his digestive system to accommodate the amount of carbohydrates that he knew he would need to hit the sub-2 marathon. So just to give you an example of what did ELIUD KIPCHOGE practice during this entire sub-2 marathon. So yeah, so there's this sports, I'm going to try and highlight these supplement companies because these are the real strategies that these guys use. I in no way promote either or, whichever what I discuss. So Morton is one of the key European supplement brands which played a very important role in fueling Kipchoge in both 2017 as well as 2019. And I had the privilege of meeting the head sports nutritionist of Morton back in 2019. And it was so fascinating to know the amount of research that has been brought up in sports drinks. Like we studied in Apurva's class that you need an isotonic sports drink, 6 to 8% of carbohydrates in 100 ml. So which means 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrates in a liter, and you can consume that during. But these guys thought about how about, you know, because consuming so much of fluids can be taxing, it can lead to gut issues. Why not try and improve our strategy? And they built on something called as a hydrogel. Now Morton predominantly has two things, like you can see it's called a drink mix and there's something called as a gel. So basically drink mix is nothing but a powder that you put in water. When you consume that, which is around 200 odd ml, when you consume that and it reaches your stomach, the HCl that your stomach releases reacts to the energy mix, which includes some amount of natural gels, like the pectin that we studied, for example. And it lands up following a gel-like structure, which passes on very easily into your small intestine and further, where it's easily digested and absorbed. And those carbohydrates are then absorbed at a rate of 1 or 1.2 grams per minute, because it's a multiple transportable carbohydrate with a combination of glucose and fructose. So this is an energy mix example. At the same time, this is, if you can see, this is the gel that they've built, and this is, if you can see, this is the gel-like structure that is which is unlike the gels that we have today in the market. And it's got such an important combination, because if you take it in and then it opens up only in the small intestine, where it's very easily absorbed at a particular rate. Now, just to quickly tell you, what does this include? So you have a sachet of 40 grams, and it contains approximately 25 odd grams of your carbohydrates. So it's believed that ELIUD typically landed up consuming 3 to 4 of these gels along with 1 or 2 energy drink mixes throughout 1 hour. And he was constantly being supplied to that every single 10 odd minutes for that fuel to be in place. Now, how would he have trained? So which brings me to the next concept of how you can land up training your gut. So before we actually go on to training the gut, I know that Pallavi's briefly touched upon this, but I just want to highlight a training periodization so that it becomes easier for us to understand where we can implement our strategies. So we would probably start off with the pre-season, and we'll go on to like a general preparation phase. The focus of this would be to increase your endurance, and your training would be predominantly longer in volume and low to moderate on intensity. And as you go on to the specific preparation phases, you'll realize that the intensity goes on rising up. And this is also a very important time to train at slightly higher intensities as you go by, while buffering that lactic acid that keeps coming along. So throughout this time, the whole aerobic capacity enhancement becomes priority. And as you go on to a pre-competition phase, where you might do these 1 or 2 races just before your main peak race, and you might want to trial a few race day strategies that you would have built, that you would have tried in your long runs, for example, and you would try that in your smaller competitions, not so important competitions, until you hit the competition phase where you know that, okay, this is my main peak competition, and this is where I am expecting my best performance, for example. So I would land up pushing in those carbohydrates, or I would land up pushing in the amount of carbohydrates during the races, during my training protocol, especially in the longer runs, like on a Sunday, in my preparation phases, or in my pre-competition, those smaller competition phases, and constantly refining my nutrition strategies. It's very important, because to try this out before you actually trial these in smaller competitions, to avoid things like runner's diarrhea, which is very common. And we need to follow a diet wherein not just the fact that we are used to the increased amount of carbohydrates, but we are following something as low residue, as low fiber as possible, to avoid any signal to the gut, because we know that there is barely any blood supply to your gastrointestinal system, and most of that is predominantly in your muscle cells. Another key thing is hemolysis as well. You know that the endurance athletes, one of the key things that they face is RBC breakdown, and therefore, like Pallavi highlighted, the importance of iron, B12, folate becomes very important, and something that you'd start building on right since your general prep and specific prep phases. You would typically load with respect to the carb loading protocol that Pallavi mentioned until 60 minutes before your races, and you wouldn't land up probably adding anything or fueling anything an hour before the race, predominantly because of a rebound hypoglycemia. So let's say I consume a bread, or I consume fruit, which is easily available anytime 30-45 minutes before my race. I know that I will have that insulin spike up, and it will push all of the carbohydrates from these bread or from the fruit into my muscle cell, and then my insulin is going to drop back. So you do not want your drop in blood sugar just at the start of your race. So try and avoid anything just 45 minutes to 60 minutes before your races. And like I said, try and focus on a diet that is as low on fiber and as low on residue. So you will have to train your body for rice, for example. For somebody who's used to pasta, maybe pasta. For idlis, which are famously rice cakes that many people end up doing abroad. I mean, these are simple items that you could try and train your gut with in the initial phases, so that you get better in terms of your race day nutrition strategy. Now, I will predominantly focus on hydration and try and cover 3 aspects of it, which is hyperhydration, hyponatremia and hypohydration, and let's try and understand what that means. So we know that when we land up training, we know that we're going to sweat. When we sweat and when we have that fluid loss, we know that as 2% body weight loss, as fluids can lead you to dehydration, can drop your motor skills, can drop your entire rate of perceived exertion. We know that that happens, and we know that when you're hypohydrated, predominantly due to excessive sweating during exercise, you know that your entire blood volume drops. You know that your cardiac function drops because your heart rate increases now. Your body temperature increases. Your blood volume is more concentrated now. This triggers your thirst. This causes central nervous fatigue also to an extent. Your muscle glycogen use is suddenly increased. Your rate of perceived exertion, which is RPE, is also increased, and all of this is impairing your performance. So what could be those few pre-race hydration strategies that you could think of? One of that has been researched and spoken about a lot is hyperhydration. Clearly, as the name suggests, trying to have a fluid protocol from couple of days to a day to just hours before your race, where you deliberately increase your fluid intake so that you already start the race hyperhydrated, so that you have better thermoregulation mechanisms in place, and then you're not dehydrated very early in your race. So typically 4 hours before, you can consume 5 to 7 ml per kilogram of body weight. And there are 3 things with which you can check your hydration levels, like Apurva mentioned in our first class, which is your weight, so pre and post weight. And this is something that you should have followed as a practice right from your training routines, especially your Sunday long run routines, where you build out a mean or an average weight loss as fluids that you experience over your training protocols, so that you consciously rebuild or replenish those fluids that you lose with this strategy of 1 to 1.5 liters per kilogram of the body weight that you lose. The other thing that you can check is, of course, your urine color. And the more darker it is, you know that you're dehydrated already. And if after following the 4-hour pre-routine as well, and if you think your urine color is still dark enough, that is when you can additionally consume 3 to 5 ml per kilogram of body weight. And the third thing with which you know that you're dehydrated is thirst, because it's said and stated that if you're thirsty already, that means you're dehydrated already. And that is a signal enough to increase your fluid intake. The other key thing that I want to put across is glycerol as a supplement, and it was banned for the longest time, but it's no longer banned as per the 2019 WADA guidelines. And it says that the main purpose of glycerol is this molecule who's extremely hydrophilic. It loves water. So glycerol is going to attract all of that water and increase your fluids, not just inside the cells, but also outside of your cells. And this is a typical strategy that you could use, which is 1 to 1.2 grams of glycerol per kilogram of body weight. And it's mixed in 25 to 30 ml of water, again, per kilogram of body weight. And then you can use other modalities, like adding it in a sports drink, which is already rich in carbohydrates, or throwing in some sodium, because we know that sodium attracts water as well. So these could be a few hyperhydration strategies. Now, the biggest drawback to doing that is that it's going to get you to increase your weight. So you need to weigh whether me being well hydrated is determining my performance, or, you know, the 2 kilos that are extra on me are fine and I can manage that, or those 2 extra kilos are actually reducing my fuel economy and I am just spending away my energy, spending away my fuel during my entire race. You need to choose which one's better or which one's worse, and accordingly build out that strategy for you. Other than that, typically 400 to 800 ml per liters per hour is a general guideline for fluid ingestion. And like I said, again, the rehydration strategy would be to 100% to 150% of your fluids that are lost. You want to replenish that post your races or post your training sessions. Having said that, it brings me to a very important issue again, which is hyponatremia. Because when you land up hyperhydrating, or when you land up consuming too much amount of fluids without any electrolytes for that matter, you dilute your entire plasma sodium, so you have low levels of sodium. in your blood, and at the same time you're continuously sweating, so you're also losing the sodium through your sweat, and this can cause hyponatremia. And the symptoms, if you observe, are very similar to that of dehydration. And the reason I'm mentioning is this because I will tell you about it just in a minute. One of the key cases that I experienced wherein somebody confused dehydration and hyponatremia and something lethal happened. So symptoms such as confusion, weakness, fainting can start happening when your levels drop 132 millimole per liter and lesser. And most endurance sports, predominantly your running sports and your cycling, is where hyponatremia is said to be most common. And it's always recommended that you have at least 10 to 30 millimole per liter of that sodium in whichever sports drink, gel, energy drink that you think of consuming during your races. Now, this is an example of one of the guys who was a recreational athlete, but very observant and was doing full marathons quite nicely. He was doing that over a period of 7 to 10 years, and he finished the full marathon, the Tata Marathon in 2019, and he landed up facing a lot of these weakness and confusion sort of symptoms, and everybody advised him to drink water, and he landed up gulping down at least 2 liters of water post his race. So not just the fact that he was hydrated during the race, but he also consumed 2 liters of water immediately post the race as well. And then he fainted off, and he doesn't till date remember what happened to him at all. And people around him told him later that he was in a state of delirium, he was confused, he was talking something else, he was extremely weak, he fainted across, and then he was admitted in the hospital thereafter. So it's very common to confuse hyponatremia and to confuse dehydration because of common symptoms. But like I said, the general strategy is to ensure that you're constantly replacing the fluids with electrolytes or with sodium, and not just replacing that with water alone. This brings me to a completely new concept. I mean, it existed, but it's just come into light only now, which talks about hypohydration, being less hydrated or being adapted to dehydration. So how does that play a role at all? So this was one of the studies done, like the title suggests, is drinking behaviors of elite male runners during marathon competitions. Now, let me just tell you, the sample size is 13 odd, I believe. And these are all major competitions. So this is your Olympics right here, 2004. This is your Beijing 2008. These are your world championships. So these are all important competitions, and these are all winners. These guidelines or these consumptions of fluids are of winners. So this is the first place at 2004, first place 2006, so on and so forth. So Chicago first place, Chicago second place. So these are all elite men marathoners, full marathoners. And you'd be surprised to know that as per the 0.4 to 0.8 liter per hour as guidelines, most of them, if you observe, kind of fit into the guideline. But I just want you to still focus on the fact that somebody consumed 0.2 liters, so 200 ml per hour, and he was still the guy who won the race. Somebody consumed 0.3, 0.4, just nearly the guideline, and these guys actually won the races, which is why that brings me to the next slide. How do you then follow the hydration theoretical schedules, or do you train, or do you plan your drinking schedule in such a way that works the best for you? So like I said, I mean, the results highlighted that most of the fluid intakes were broadly within the range of the recommendations, and you would be shocked to know that none of them maintained their body masses. All of them, in spite of consuming the recommended fluid intake, had a body mass loss of over 3%. So the strategy probably could be to be ad libitum, just when you need it, or when thirst signifies, or the way you've planned in your periodizations. So this is a world record winner. So Haile Gebrselassie in 2008 in the Berlin Marathon lost about 10% of his body weight during the whole marathon. But he was still the world record winner. He set a world record in place. So maybe two aspects here. One, train to tolerate dehydration to an extent. We know that fluid fluids are important. We know that hydration is important, but learn to tolerate some amount of dehydration as well. So this is one of the periodized nutrition strategy, training dehydrated, that you would practice probably as your mileages increase in your training routine. At the same time, so basically the conclusion is probably training dehydrated will get you a medal, but being hydrated and gaining that 2 or 3 kilos because of overconsumption, you might actually lose a medal. So you really need to see what works for you and then accordingly build out your own race day strategies. This brings me to the third and one of the most talked about strategy of fat adaptation in endurance sport, or keto adaptation in endurance sport. And I'm going to give you an example of Tour de France. But before that, I mean, keto adaptation is something as a concept that came in the 1950s and 1960s, where you had eminent researchers like Timothy Noakes and Jeff Wallach and Dr. Philip Maffetone, who built out these case studies with the athletes that they were working with and tried to trial a keto adapted diet during their times. And some of the case studies were quite successful in improving their performances. But I would just say that these were predominantly case studies, and we could not even today generalize fat adaptation or keto adaptation as a strategy for all endurance sports. So when we come to fat adaptation, I mean, why would you want to do it? As I explained earlier, the longer the event, especially 3-4 hours and further, you know that you have abundant triglyceride stores, and you know that your body will rely on the triglycerides as predominant sources of fuel, and not just the ones that are stored in adipocytes, but we have decent amount present as intramuscular triglycerides. And we know that if we landed up training for aerobic capacity while coupling that with a high fat diet, we can enhance the way your intramuscular triglycerides are broken down and used as a source of fuel. So typically, I mean, it's said, some of the research papers highlight that you can reach fat max, or the maximum amount of fat that you can use, which can be 3 or 4 times more if you do fat adaptation, or you do a high fat, low carbohydrate diet at 65% of your VO2 max. And then as you couple that with an excellent training protocol for aerobic capacity, you might be in a position to still use those intramuscular triglycerides even at the intensities of 75 to 85%. However, this can't be sustainable. So it's possible, but it can't be sustainable. The limitations are that you will have, the reason that it can't be sustainable is because you'll have larger oxygen demand. Like I told you earlier, your body is going to use more oxygen to give you that energy from fat, and it's going to down regulate your carb oxidation. So we have these strategies, right? Everybody builds in. So when they see that finish line, and when you want to pace up and you want to increase up the intensity a little bit, you probably are not going to have that efficient amount of carbohydrates available to you when at the finish line. So yeah, I mean, where is it that you would want to utilize it? So I would say that if you're closely working with elite marathoners or distance athletes, or even mid-distance athletes for that matter, I would try and use it in their micro cycles or their basically weekly training plan. And if you see the weekly training plan and you see that, okay, there's a Sunday long run, and there is a VO2, there's a slight VO2 session, or there is a basic endurance session, and I may want to use a little bit of these nutrition strategies where I'm not fat adapted, but I'm trying to lower my carbohydrate intake, or I'm trying to train fasted, so that I am trying to train my mitochondria to use or be more efficient in terms of fat burning for that particular endurance specific objective training protocols. And you can also it can also play an important role in improving your body composition, because like how Pallavi highlighted, I mean, endurance athletes are leaner. You want a better power to weight ratio, which means that you need whatever skeletal muscle mass that you preserve, you need that to be absolutely efficient in its functionality. And therefore we can land up using a low carb, high fat diet, maybe in the general prep phase, to land up working on body composition and dropping that fat mass. So that brings me to another very famous case study of Chris Froome, who has held titles of Tour de France, I think 5 times, 4 times as position 1 and once as position 2nd, I believe. And a lot of hype in media about he following a ketogenic diet. And again, one of the prime nutritionists, James Morton, who's also worked with FC Barcelona and various other teams across European again. And he predominantly worked with Chris Froome and devised a nutrition strategy. So I'm just going to read out these 2 questions which appeared as a part of an interview in Aspetar, which is a sports medicine journal. And so somebody asked him, what are your nutrition strategies during your training? So he highlighted that he trains with low carbohydrate availability to promote training adaptations, but he continues to focus on a high protein intake because he just doesn't want to lose the muscle mass, which could be a possibility in longer endurance events or training schedules. At the same time, he wants to ensure that the power to weight ratio is well balanced off. And whenever there are high intensity effort related training sessions, he would want the carbohydrates to come as fuel in as well. So therefore, when you land up actually, doing those stages of Tour de France, so just for y'all, if you don't know what Tour de France is basically like a 21 stage, it's a 23 day with 2 rest days. So it's a long cycling event, and it's very brutal on your body. Different stages have different courses. So for example, it starts in Nice in France, and you have stage 1, which is predominantly done on a flat surface. Stage 2 is something that's a mountain-based stage where you have some amount of altitude. Phase 3 is again flat. Phase 4 is mountain. Very crazy terrains, very harsh climatic conditions, and you can't really be doing a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet in here, because based on the different climes, you'll have to change your fuel usage and try and push for carbohydrates to come in place and save you and give you the energy that you need. So, which brings me to his inclusion of a lot of these carb-based options. Basically, I just want to highlight that he's used both strategies wisely. So it's best of both worlds. And he's used a lot of rice cakes. He's included bars, gels, all of that throughout his entire race day strategy. And he's figured a way out to balance and get the best of both worlds, of both nutrition strategies. So James Morton landed up closely working with SIS, which is another supplement brand in Europe. The reason I'm highlighting this again is just for you to have an idea on how and what kind of supplements do they use literally in a race. So SIS again is an eminent brand in Europe, and James Morton, SIS, and Chris Froome, and something called as Team Sky, which provided him meals throughout the races, played a very important role in contributing to his fuel. And there is something called, you'd be fascinated to know that apart from the fact that you win the race, another award is given to the king of mountain stages. So you have these mountain stages where you have more mountain and more hilly regions to cover, and the cyclist who reaches the peak of the mountain first is awarded the king of the mountain stage. And therefore you can use, so this is just an example on how they've used a caffeinated and a carbohydrate based hydrogel, again from the same concept, along with decent amount of fluids just before the climb begins, so that you have that fuel not just to continue the climb, so that you're in a better position in comparison to all other cyclists to land up reaching the peak before as compared to everybody else. So yeah, so that's about a few strategies, and just quickly highlighting 2 key supplements. We're going to have an amazing supplement discussion eventually by Gauri ma'am, but I'm just highlighting 2 predominant supplements that have shown massive effects in performance enhancement, and this is directly come from IAAF or World Athletics Today, and they wrote this entire nutrition consensus for nutrition for track and field athletes. So I've derived this from there, where they said that caffeine really plays an important role in reducing your rate of perceived exertion, because I feel that when longer your endurance event is, you will always have fuels, you'll always have triglyceride stores, but the first thing that hits you is central nervous system fatigue or CNS fatigue. And to combat that is where things like caffeine can play a very important role, because they stimulate you, they keep you in good mood, they keep you in the mood of pushing harder as much as possible. Because I believe it becomes more of a mind game than it is more of a physical game when the distances are extremely longer. So the dosage is around 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight per day, and you might have to fine tune it because there are inter-individual variability, and try and see which strategy works best for you, as black coffees or caffeine pills or tablets. You need to figure that out and plan accordingly. And the second most important supplement has been nitrates, and nitrates, we know, predominantly plays a very important role because it helps in the release of nitrous oxide around your blood vessels. So the more nitrous oxide there is, the amazing dilation of blood vessel you will experience, and there's going to be more oxygen and more nutrients that are going to reach your muscle cell, and that easily is going to be the clearance of carbon dioxide as well as your lactic acid if produced. So nitrates have also been said to be one of the key supplements in here. So 300 to 500 mg per day seems like a good strategy as a supplement. Please note that you can achieve all of this by food as well. So caffeine, black coffee, 1 cup of black coffee, depending on how you make it, 100 to 150 mg of caffeine is what you'd get. Nitrates, again, beetroot, we know already is an excellent source of it. And one large beetroot will contain about 150 to 200 mg of nitrates in place. So you could use that along with, key supplements based on deficiencies, if any, supplements that can help you enhance your hemoglobin and oxygen carrying capacity. So you could work on that, figure what you need, and build out your own nutrition strategy. So just to conclude from my part of this, you need to personalize and periodize everything that you do, right from your race day strategies, your hydration routine, training your gut, fat adaptations. You would probably want to utilize this on days of high volume training and on days or on the period where you're working on body composition improvement. Because, I mean, just to tell you again about Chris Froome, he wasn't actually doing so well. 2010, he came in and he started doing Tour de France. He wasn't actually doing that well. 2013, 2011 and 2012 is the phase that he really worked on his body composition, and 2013 is when he was positioned second. From then on, 2015 and 2016 and even 2017, he's on a winning spree. He's won all of those yellow jerseys and he's won Tour de France. And it's not just, it's not just nutrition, it's everything else along with it. But I think at the end of the day, you need to periodize everything, right from nutrition, right from training, right from psychological capabilities and those specific training that you would want to do. And at the end of the day, personalize your supplement intake as well. So that's pretty much it from my end. I haven't opened the chat box, but more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mihira and Pallavi, for an excellent presentation. Thank you to bring out various important aspects of endurance sports like training high, compete low, and essential aspects of hyperhydration, hyponatremia, differences between dehydration and hyponatremia. These are some of the very important and practical things that the nutritionists need to know. So the presentation was excellent. I am very happy with your presentation, and so are the viewers and the listeners today. Let's take few questions. The first question was asked regard to Pallavi. What is REDS? That is relative energy deficiency in sport. So can you explain a little bit about it, Pallavi?
Yeah, basically if you are having any kind of, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
All right.
Pallavi is muted. I think, Apurva, can you just unmute her?
Hello? Yeah,
Yes.
am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so basically that slide itself explained that if there is energy imbalance or if you are deficient in energy, macronutrient wise or micronutrient wise, or if you are lacking in something, then there is a possibility that you may suffer from metabolic disorders, okay? Or if it's female, then there is something called as female athlete triad, wherein osteoarthritis, amenorrhea, okay? These are the conditions which takes place. So these are called energy, REDS, basically, relative energy deficiency syndrome.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. There is another question regarding the vitamin D,
D.
deficiency and supplementation.
Yes, so dose, I read that question out. So it's 60,000 IU and it's now lowered. So basically, it's because to avoid ill effects of extra vitamin D in the body. Okay. So if it is there, there can be patches on skin, and there can be gastric troubles as well. So dosages are lowered for vitamin D.
Uh,
Yeah. Adolescent athletes, I guess. There was a
yes,
question of
yes,
fat
there was a
percentage
question
in
for
kids.
the, yes, fat body
Yeah,
fat
so
percentage in endurance activities.
yeah, so one thing which I would like to highlight about adolescent athletes. So first of all, there is nothing something where fat percentage has to be like 5%, 6%, 7%. The ideal average ratio is 11%. Please correct me, ma'am, if I'm wrong. So it has to be below 11% of the fat in adolescent athletes.
I would like to add to Pallavi's
Yeah.
fat percentage for children and child athletes. There are certain norms which are developed by Dr. Vaman Khadilkar for Indian athletes, and some position stands are there. So you can refer to those guidelines where the fat percentage for Indian adolescent, and they are not for athlete as such, but they are for the normal population for different age groups of children. So those who are working with child and adolescent athletes can refer to them as a guideline.
Yeah, one thing I would like to add with respect to adolescent athletes question. So basically, it also differs from sports to sports. So make sure that if somebody is into aerobics, then they don't need to have six-pack ab, because I have seen parents coming to me saying, he should have the flat stomach. So that's not the criteria for lower fat percentage. So that is something which we should have.
Also, the growth spurts need to be considered when we are
Yeah.
looking at adolescent and child athletes.
Yeah, ma'am, somebody have asked for the reference of the Khadilkar sir's research.
Dr. Vaman Khadilkar is the author of the paper, and he works with Jahangir Hospital. I think he has got that developed. You can just check the website. What is your take on carb mouth rinse? Is the next question.
Yes. So basically, it is recommended, but only I think within that first half an hour, or let's say 1 hour's time, not beyond that. I doubt how much mimicking will be going to benefit athletes.
If I can just add, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Carb rinse will come into play when there's CNS fatigue. So sometimes when you can't land up loading so much of fluids during your races or during your training protocol, this is when you can mimic, you can fool your brain in thinking that you have enough source. Like I said initially, CNS fatigue hits you before you actually lose out on the fuel stores. So it can definitely be consumed. And there was a big trend that came in during the FIFA World Cup 2 years back, where you had Ronaldo and Messi gargling around.
Yeah.
And spitting continuously.
And spitting constantly on the field. And I think it's just grown from there. And sorry, just to add again, there's an amazing research paper that's just come on 16th of May, and that talks about whether taste can be ergogenic.
Yes.
So it's all about training your mind. Your mind.
You have to train your mind as well as the gut. So your gut is your brain. Actually, nowadays we are more talking about that the gut works like
gut health.
Gut health and the brain. So that's a very good point. Another question is regarding
the keto diet and hydration.
Yes. What would be the hydration?
I feel drinking water is important. Mihira, what do you think?
Well, I think so. There are 2-3 things in terms of following keto adaptation or fat adaptation. It's something that you don't do just for a week, because you take a week or 2 weeks to get adapted to that. Yeah. At the same time, as an acute response, you'll end up losing a lot of electrolytes. So hydration and replenishing those electrolytes become extremely significant as you in the acute phases. But as you get adapted over 3-4 weeks and further, then your body itself lands up balancing those requirements off.
Okay, thank you. Then there is a question on how do you determine rate of perceived exertion. There are various ways, and I think
Yes.
we need exercise.
Yeah.
Exercise experts who can explain
Yes.
this.
We need a separate session also
On that.
for that. Yeah.
Yes.
Specific books and other materials for further reading. Yes.
So,
My sports science is one of them. I think there is one book written by Gitanjali ma'am and Subhadra ma'am. So you should read that book compulsorily. Nutritional guidelines for Indian athletes. So if you can read that book, you will find many of my slides where had data from that book as well.
Thank you so much, Pallavi.
So thank you, ma'am, for giving us that foundation.
Okay. Drinking water or hydrogels before the event. What
How
is the best?
The cause of bloating during the event?
No, so that's why they introduced hydrogels. So if you took the gel, there are so many practical challenges, right? When you take the gel, it's because it gets stuck sometime through your throat, it doesn't land up reaching, or when you take too much of the gel, it just sits in your GI tract and doesn't land up getting absorbed at the rate that you want to, which is why they built hydrogels, which is a combination of fructose and glucose with addition of alginate and pectin, which are the gel forming substances that keep the hydrogel in such a phase that it doesn't land up bloating you. It just directly gets to the small intestine and lands up from there. You just land up absorbing those carbohydrates and electrolytes.
Also, there is one important point that all these strategies that they do need practice. So as Mihira had mentioned, in all those microcycles when they are doing or Sunday long runs, each one has to actually practice. So the athlete has to be told, either whether he is a recreational runner or a professional runner, it is important that they practice all these strategies regarding carbohydrate, or if they want to use any other method or any supplement. Practice is very, very essential. So to train the gut is also very important.
Mihira has been asked the question that which brand of hydrogels, glycerol, you have worked with?
I have no experience in actually giving glycerol to somebody because I'm just too afraid that there might be issues of weight gain. If you ask my opinion, I'm rather of the opinion that it's fine if I'm hypohydrated and I train dehydrated and I get adapted to that, and I feel personally that will give me the result that I need, versus doing some hyperhydration strategies leading to weight gain and that actually being more detrimental.
Okay, I would like to add one more point here, like glycerol supplementation or taking glycerol. So it's basically the normal glycerine that is consumed. Just by putting it in water and just drinking it, what my athletes have told us that they have the experience of the dryness in the mouth is lowered because of that, and that helps them to sustain their activity for a longer duration of time. So that is the benefit, but for the past few years it was banned, and again now it has come back to the list. So still we are not recommending glycerol, although some benefits have been shown. Okay, so a very wonderful session. I thank Mihira and Pallavi for doing an excellent job. And tomorrow's session will be by Gauri Murthy, a very eminent sports nutritionist, and she'll be talking about supplements. So don't miss that.
And link of the session is same. Please note that.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.